Good morning, Year 6. Welcome to today's reading session. We're going to be carrying on with Private Peaceful now. We're going to be looking at Chapter 5, and we're going to be thinking about the choices Michael Morpurgo, the author, made when he was deciding which language to use. If you think about it as a writer, when you use shouted, you're showing somebody shouted, but you're also maybe showing something about how they're feeling. You're telling me that the character might be nervous, they might be worried about being hidden. But if you're shouting, they're not worried about being hidden. So the choices we make as writers and the choices we can look at that authors have made tell us something about the picture they're trying to paint for us in our minds. Okay, as we read through them today, to be successful, we're going to identify what a question's asking. Always important that we understand what we're being asked to find out. We locate both within the question and within the text the key language which relates to what we're focusing on. We consider the alternative choices. So as that example about shouting and whispering, what other choices? If I'd used whisper, I could have used shouting, which would have shown me that. But if I'm just whimpering, it shows that I'm... So there's different choices that authors make, and each time they use a verb, they use an adjective, they use an adverb, they've picked that one rather than other ones. And if I think about the ones they chose not to use, I can think about maybe why they've chosen the one they have used. Okay, and then we can think about our answers, making sure that our answers make as much reference as possible to the language that's used. Again, as I've said frequently, you don't need to use a direct quotation, but you do need as much as possible to make reference to the text. Okay, guys, a little bit of a quiz here. True or false? Okay, you can shout out your answers, or you can write your answers on your sheet, or you can do a T for true and kind of F for false if you fancy doing that. Okay, I obviously won't see, but it'd be interesting to see how you've got on. So true or false? Molly is Charlie's mother. It's false. False. Mrs. Peaceful's Charlie's mother. Molly is Charlie's, well, we're not quite sure what that relationship's going to become yet, but we do know that she was his friend when they were younger. Okay. The Colonel was Charlie's employer all the way through the story. So all the way through to the end. You haven't read it yet, have you? That's not fair. But actually it is, because is the Colonel all the way the person who's employing Charlie in your story that you've read so far up to page 70? No. It's not true, because eventually the Colonel sacks him, doesn't he? Because the issue over. Does Joe live with Mrs. Peaceful? Yeah, he does. He's her son. Okay. And the Grandma Wolf, Grandma Wolf lived with the Peaceful family. Is that true? Because right now she lives with the Colonel, so I don't think she. Oh, lived. The ed suffix gives us a clue, does it? So Grandma Wolf lived with the Peaceful family. That gives us an implication that's in the past. She did. She did before. She doesn't now. Charlie likes animals. Well, he did before when he got Bertha. Does he now? Yeah, because when he's working for this farmer who likes a drink, but with this new farmer that he's working for, we know that he does enjoy the company of the animals. Okay, guys. Reading from page 71. I know when we've looked at this vocabulary exercise previously, some of us have found it a bit challenging with 2 or 3 sentences per page. So I've just given you 1 per page today. Same idea. There's some words that are used incorrectly in the text. In my sentences that are from the text. So I've taken words from Private Peaceful, I've put them in the piece of writing that you are seeing from me, and I've used the wrong one in a place. I'll try and highlight a little bit more which one's wrong today, so you can see if you can spot the correct one based on looking at the correct page. So reading from page 70, or the end of page 70 to 71. The newspapers were full of the war. If you remember, Molly's been looking after them for the Colonel, where she irons them to keep the ink nice and dry. The newspapers were full of the war that had now begun. But aside from the army coming to the village and buying up lots of local farm horses for cavalry horses, it had hardly touched us at all. So it's not that the war is like something with fingers, but when we say something's not touched you, it means it's not come into your world very much. It's not come into your life. So the one thing that's affected them so far is the idea of the army coming and buying the horses, because they need them to help the soldiers who are part of the cavalry, the soldiers who ride on horses. The soldiers need horses to ride on. So they come into a village, they take it, they're buying the horses. But at the moment, they're not dropping bombs. They're not digging trenches in the village. So it doesn't feel like they're at war yet. I was still Charlie's postman, still Molly's postman. So I saw Molly often, though not as often as before. For some reason, the letters between them seemed less frequent. But at least with me now working with Charlie for 6 days a week, we were all 3 together again in a kind of way, linked by letters. Then that link was cruelly broken, and what followed broke my heart, broke all our hearts. I remember Charlie and I had been haymaking with Farmer Cox, young buzzards wheeling about above us all day. Young buzzards are a bird. Wheeling about tells us how they're moving in the sky. Wheeling about above us all day. Swallows skimming the mown grass all about us as the shadows lengthened and the evening darkened. We arrived home later than usual, dusty and exhausted and hungry too. Inside, we found Mother sitting upright in her chair, doing her sewing, and opposite her, Molly, and to our surprise, her mother. So they're surprised to see Molly's mother. It's interesting she's there. Everyone in the room looked as grim-faced as Molly's mother, even Big Joe, who doesn't normally react, does he, in the way that we'd expect somebody to react. But even Big Joe, even Molly, whose eyes I could see were red from crying. Bertha was howling ominously from outside in the woodshed. Charlie, said Mother, setting her sewing aside between he puts it to one side. Molly's mother has been waiting for you. She has something she wants to say to you. Yours, I believe, she said, her voice as hard as stone. She handed Charlie a packet of letters tied up with blue ribbon. I found them. I've read them, every one of them. So has Molly's father. Okay, just have a look then at this passage that we just read through. So Sammy felt darkened due to working hard. I don't think he did. Okay, how did Sammy feel? Sammy felt not darkened. So Charlie here and Tommy are working hard, so that gives us a clue that they're working hard. Now, darkened isn't how we feel when working hard. I'm looking here, darkened's there, but how are they feeling? We arrived home later than usual, dusty. Felt dusty due to working hard. Doesn't quite work. Which word is it? Exhausted. Okay, so it should be Sammy felt exhausted due to working so hard. Now, when I've written it underneath, the purpose of writing it in handwriting is to make the point. I really do want you to try as often as you can, guys, to keep your handwriting as neat as possible when you're working at home. I know it's tricky. I know you might not have line paper or the pens you're used to, but please try, because otherwise it'll be extra hard when we come back. Okay, the villain here moved aside and scared the young victim. Okay, now the adverb there is aside, the adverb which changes the verb of moved. Adverb there. So I'm looking, I think, for an adverb. Okay, so I'm looking for an adverb on page 71 that I can change aside for. Okay, so see if you can spot one. It's page 72. So is Molly's father. So we know everything. Don't bother to deny it, Charlie Peaceful. The evidence is here in these letters. Molly has been punished already. Her father has seen to that. I've never read anything so wicked in all my life. Never. All that love talk. Disgusting. But you've meeting as well, haven't you? You can see how angry she is by these questions that she's asking, these questions she knows the answer to, but she's making a point. She's not happy with it all. Charlie looked across at Molly. The look between them said it all, and I knew then that I'd been betrayed. Yes, said Charlie. I couldn't believe what he was saying. They hadn't told me. They'd been meeting in secret, and neither of them had told me. Now, the adults in the room, in terms of Molly's mother's angry at Charlie and at Molly for meeting because she doesn't want them to meet at all. But Tommy's angry for a different reason. Tommy's angry because he feels that Charlie and Molly should have met with him as well. He should have been part of their group of three, but because they're meeting as a two, it shows he's not part of it anymore. I couldn't believe what he was saying. They hadn't told me. They'd been meeting in secret, and neither of them had told me. There, didn't I tell you, Mrs. Peaceful? Molly's mother went on, her voice quivering with rage. I'm sorry, said Mother, but you'll still have to tell me why it is they shouldn't be meeting. Charlie's 17 now, and Molly's 16. Old enough, I'd say. I'm sure we both had our little rendezvous here and there when we were their age. Rendezvous is a meet-up. Sometimes that's what's called an illicit one, so where maybe somebody doesn't think you should be meeting up with somebody. It's a rendezvous. Spies might meet up with other spies in a rendezvous. It's a time you arrange to meet somebody. You speak for yourself, Mrs. Peaceful, Molly's mother replied with a supercilious sneer. Sorry. Molly's mother replied, You speak for yourself, Mrs. Peaceful. Molly's father and I made it quite clean to both of them. We forbade them to have anything to do with each other. It's wickedness, Mrs. Peaceful. You wickedness. The Colonel has warned us. You know about your son's wicked thieving ways. Oh, yes, we know about him. So this is back to the idea of Bertha being that dog that was stolen, or although it was in fact bought. Now here we've got the sentence, my sister was forbade when she stole money from me. Forbade doesn't sound quite right there. I find a different word. If somebody's stolen money from somebody, what might happen to them? See if I can have a look on page 72 then. What's the language that should be there instead of forbade? Right, guys. Page 73. Really, said Mother? Tell me, do you always do what the Colonel says? Do you always? I really like the character of Mrs. Peaceful because she doesn't take the nonsense. Do you always think what the Colonel thinks? If he says the earth was flat, would you believe him? Or did he just threaten you? He's good at that. Molly's mother stood up, full of righteous indignation. I haven't come here to argue the toss. I have come to tell of your son's misdemeanors. It's like things he's done wrong. To say that I won't have him leading our Molly into the ways of wickedness and sin. He must never see her again. Do you hear? If he does, then the Colonel will know about it. I'm telling you, the Colonel will know about it. I have no more to say. Come along, Molly. And taking Molly's hand firmly in hers, she swept out, leaving us all looking at one another and listening to Bertha still howling. Well, said Mother after a while, I'll get you supper, shall I, boys? I like this idea. Mum just moves on. She thinks Molly's mother's talk nonsense. She's not going to engage with that. That night, I lay there beside Charlie, not speaking. I was so filled with anger and resentment towards him that I never wanted to speak to him again, nor to Molly come to that. Then, out of the silence, he said, All right, I should have told you, Tomo. Molly said I should tell you. I didn't want to. I couldn't, that's all. Why not? I asked. For several moments, he did not reply. Because I know, and she does too. That's why she wouldn't tell you herself, Charlie said. What do you think she knows? What do you think they both know? Have a think about that. We've got the idea of the sentence about Tom. Have a look at if you can find which word is incorrect. And you can see here today, I've actually highlighted in red the words that need replacing in those sentences. Right, guys, then the impact of language. So she didn't really understand what the war was about. This is a bit from earlier. She admitted only that some archduke, whatever that was, had been shot in a place called Sarajevo, wherever that was. Now, there's a verb in there, and the question says, what does the verb suggest about Molly's perception of herself? So the verb is admitted. I think that tells me something about how Molly thinks of what other people think of her. So which one of these is better? The fact that she was admitting she didn't know something she was unhappy about, so she was unhappy about it. And the second one says she didn't know something showed she was proud of it. If you admit something, are you proud of it or are you unhappy about it? Let's think. I think, if I'm looking at that, if you admit it, you're saying, I don't feel good about it. I've made a mistake or I feel bad about it. So the fact our narrator, Tommy, describes Molly as admitting she didn't know something showed she was unhappy about it as opposed to being proud of it. If you're proud of it, you don't admit it. You own it. You want people to know you did it. If you admit it, you're saying, sorry, I shouldn't have done that, or sorry, I wish I'd done better. So admitting that verb shows me she's not proud of her, what we might say is her ignorance. She didn't know as much as you guys did about World War One and the Sarajevo and the issues relating to Archduke Ferdinand. Now, if we have a look at this section, then we can see the impact of the language that's used, and we can try and think about what impressions Bertha's feeling when we can see him howling ominously. Her howling ominously. Do we think Bertha's happy? Do we think she's unhappy? Can you find on page 72 two ways that characters are shown to be angry? So two ways, and then that righteous indignation which Molly's mother stood up with. What does that show about her? She's righteously indignant. Is she pleased? Is she calm? Or is she really, really angry with the company she's keeping? Does she think that the people are people she should be spending time with? Is she pleased by what Charlie and Molly have been up to? Or does she think that they are thieves? What does she think of them? You're going to fill in your answers on that sheet again. Okay. Right, guys, I look forward to reading those responses. I hope you're enjoying Private Peaceful and engaging with it. Thank you very much for listening today, and I will see you very soon.